The autumn leaves swirled across the dusty main street of Promise Creek as Grace Thatcher stepped down from the stagecoach, her pale hands trembling with more than just the chill of the October air. It was 1878, and she had traveled over 2,000 miles from Boston to this remote corner of Wyoming territory with nothing but a small trunk of possessions and a letter from a doctor that had sealed her fate. "Last stop, Promise Creek," the stagecoach driver called, tossing down her weathered trunk with little ceremony. Grace winced at the thud, knowing the trunk contained the few delicate reminders of her past life, porcelain figurines her mother had given her, books that had been her salvation during long bedridden days, and medicines that had proven useless against her condition. She took a deep breath of the mountain air, feeling her chest tighten with the familiar ache that had become her constant companion. "Need help with that trunk, miss?" A deep voice cut through her thoughts. She turned to see a tall man in a worn leather vest and dusty boots. His face was tanned from the sun with lines at the corners of his eyes, suggesting he smiled often, though he wasn't smiling now. His expression was one of concern as he noticed her unsteady stance. "Thank you, but I can manage," she said, even as she swayed slightly. "No offense intended, madam, but that trunk looks heavier than you." He tipped his hat back, revealing hair the color of wheat fields. "Name's Noah Jackson. Most folks just call me Jackson." Grace hesitated, the stubborn independence that had carried her across the country warring with practicality. "Grace Thatcher," she finally replied. "And perhaps you're right about the trunk." Noah lifted her trunk with ease, balancing it on one broad shoulder. "New to Promise Creek?" "Yes, I'm here to stay with my aunt, Martha Thatcher. She runs the millinery shop, I believe." Noah's expression brightened. "Miss Martha?" "Sure, everyone knows her. Shop's just down the way." He gestured down the street. "I'd be happy to escort you." They walked in silence for a moment, Grace struggling to maintain a normal pace, despite the tightness in her lungs and the fatigue that weighed on her like a sodden blanket. "If you don't mind me asking, what brings you all the way out here? Most folks are heading the other direction, toward the bigger cities." Grace clutched her reticule tighter. The doctors in Boston suggested a change of climate might be beneficial. She didn't add that they had given her less than a year to live if she remained in the damp coastal air. Noah seemed to sense there was more to the story, but didn't press. As they approached a small shop with a display of bonnets in the window, Grace felt a wave of dizziness sweep over her. Her knees buckled, and she would have fallen if Noah hadn't caught her arm. "Whoa there," he said softly, steadying her. His eyes, a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin, searched hers with concern. "I'm sorry," she whispered, embarrassed. "The journey was rather taxing." "No need for apologies. Let's get you inside to your aunt." The bell above the shop door jingled as they entered. A plump woman with silver-streaked hair looked up from a half-finished hat, her face transforming from polite shopkeeper's interest to joy. "Gracie? Is that my Gracie?" Martha Thatcher hurried around the counter, enveloping Grace in a warm embrace that smelled of lavender and hat starch. "Hello, Aunt Martha," Grace said, fighting back tears of relief. Martha pulled back, holding Grace at arm's length to examine her. "Lord above, child, you're thin as a rail." She turned to Noah. "Thank you for bringing my niece safely to me, Mr. Jackson." "My pleasure, Miss Martha. Found her at the stagecoach stop looking like she might blow away in the next gust." Martha's expression grew concerned as she noticed Grace's pallor. "You need rest and food, dear. There's a room all prepared for you upstairs." "I should be getting back to the ranch," Noah said, setting the trunk down. "Just came into town for supplies." He tipped his hat to Grace. "Welcome to Promise Creek, Miss Thatcher. Hope our mountain air does you good." Grace watched him leave, something about his easy confidence and kindness stirring an unexpected warmth in her chest. She quickly dismissed the feeling. She hadn't come to Wyoming for romance. She had come to die with dignity, away from the pitying glances of Boston society. "He's a good man, that Noah Jackson," Martha said, following Grace's gaze. "Runs the Broken J Ranch just outside town. Lost his father to a mining accident 2 years back and has been managing on his own ever since." She guided Grace toward the stairs at the back of the shop. "But never mind about that now. Let's get you settled." That night, after a simple but hearty supper, Grace sat by the window of her new bedroom, gazing out at the unfamiliar constellation of stars above the rugged landscape. The mountains loomed dark against the night sky, massive and eternal. She felt small beside them, her brief life a mere flicker compared to their ancient presence. She unwound the locket from around her neck inside, a small portrait of her parents, both lost to the influenza that had weakened her lungs as a child. The doctors had always marveled that she had survived it all. 24 years of borrowed time, they called it. Now, it seemed, the time was running short. Grace closed her eyes, the face of Noah Jackson unexpectedly appearing in her mind. She dismissed the image firmly. It would be cruel to allow any man to grow attached to her, knowing what she knew. The next morning, Grace insisted on helping in the shop despite Martha's protests. "I didn't come here to be an invalid," she argued gently. "Working will keep my mind occupied." Martha reluctantly agreed, and Grace found herself learning the art of millinery. Her fingers were nimble from years of embroidery and piano playing, and she discovered she had a talent for trimming hats with an elegance that appealed to the local women. 2 weeks passed, and Grace fell into a routine. The mountain air did seem to ease her breathing somewhat, though the persistent cough remained. She made a few acquaintances among the town's residents, but kept a polite distance, unwilling to form attachments she knew would only end in grief. Then, one crisp November morning, the shop bell rang, and Noah Jackson walked in, hat in hand. Grace was alone, Martha having gone to deliver a completed hat to the mayor's wife. "Mr. Jackson," she said, surprised. "Miss Thatcher." He nodded, seeming almost nervous. "You're looking well. Promise Creek agrees with you." "Thank you. What can I help you with today? Are you in need of a hat?" Noah chuckled, running a hand through his hair. "No, madam, though I suppose I could use one." He hesitated. "Actually, I came to ask if you might consider joining me for the Harvest Social this Saturday. It's a tradition around these parts. Good food, music, dancing." Grace felt her heart flutter traitorously in her chest. I'm not much of a dancer, I'm afraid." "We could just sit and talk if you prefer." His blue eyes held hers steadily. "I'd like to get to know you better, Miss Thatcher." Grace hesitated, torn between desire and duty. "Mr. Jackson, I'm flattered, truly, but I don't think it would be appropriate." His expression fell slightly. "Is there someone back in Boston?" "No, nothing like that." Grace looked down at her hands, noticing how thin her wrists had become. "It's just that I won't be staying in Promise Creek permanently." "I see." Noah studied her face for a long moment. "Well, my offer stands. Should you change your mind?" He replaced his hat. "Good day, Miss Thatcher." After he left, Grace pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the rapid beat of her heart. She hadn't expected to be tempted by anything or anyone in this place. She had come here to fade away quietly, not to discover new desires. That evening, she confided in her aunt. "I can't encourage him, Aunt Martha. It wouldn't be fair." Martha's kind eyes filled with tears. "Oh, my dear girl, is that why you've been keeping everyone at arm's length?" "Because of what those Boston doctors told you?" Grace nodded miserably. "Well, I have something to say about that." Martha took Grace's hands in hers. "Doctors aren't the good Lord. They don't know everything. My own mother was given 6 months to live when she was younger than you. She lived another 30 years out of pure stubbornness." Grace smiled weakly. "I appreciate your optimism, but my condition—" "Your condition might improve here. or it might not. But denying yourself joy in the meantime is no way to live, however long or short that life might be. The day of the harvest, social dawned clear and cold. Grace had told herself she wouldn't attend, but Martha had made her a new dress of soft blue wool that brought out the color in her pale cheeks, and somehow she found herself walking beside her aunt toward the town hall. The building was transformed with autumn decorations, dried corn husks, pumpkins, and colorful leaves adorned every surface. A small band played lively tunes in the corner, and tables groaned under the weight of pies, cakes, and savory dishes. Grace had barely taken it all in when she felt a presence at her side. Noah Jackson stood there in a clean shirt and vest, his hair neatly combed, a smile lighting his features. "You came," he said simply. "My aunt can be very persuasive," Grace replied, but she couldn't suppress a small smile in return. Noah offered his arm. "May I get you some cider?" The evening passed in a blur of conversation, laughter, and cautious joy. Noah introduced her to his friends and neighbors, all of whom welcomed her warmly. He didn't press her to dance when the music played. Instead, sitting beside her and telling stories of his ranch and the characters of Promise Creek. "See that man by the punch bowl?" Noah gestured discreetly. "That's old Pete. Claims he once wrestled a grizzly bear to a standstill. No one believes him, but no one dares say so to his face." Grace laughed, the sound surprising her. How long had it been since she had truly laughed? As the evening drew to a close, Noah walked Grace and Martha back to the millinery shop. At the door, Martha tactfully excused herself, leaving them alone in the starlight. "Thank you for a lovely evening," Grace said softly. "Thank you for giving me a chance." Noah took a step closer. "I'd like to call on you properly, if you'd allow it." Grace felt her resolve weakening. "Mr. Jackson." "Noah, please." "Noah, there are things about me you don't know. I'd like the chance to learn them." She took a deep breath, wincing at the familiar catch in her lungs. "I'm ill, Noah. The kind of illness that doesn't get better." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "The doctors in Boston gave me a year at most. That's why I came here, to spare my friends and acquaintances the discomfort of watching me decline." Noah's expression remained steady, though she saw a flicker of pain cross his features. "Is that all?" Grace stared at him bewildered. "Isn't that enough?" "Not nearly." He took her hand gently. "Grace, I've lived in these mountains all my life. I've seen people given death sentences by fancy doctors who went on to outlive those same doctors. And I've seen hail, healthy men struck down in an instant by a falling tree or a spooked horse." His voice grew soft. "None of us knows how long we have. All we can do is live each day fully." Tears filled Grace's eyes. "I can't ask you to watch me fade away." "You're not asking. I'm offering." He hesitated, then added, "My mother had consumption. The doctor said she wouldn't see me reach 10 years old. She lived to see me turn 20, and every one of those years was filled with love and purpose." A tear spilled down Grace's cheek. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "That makes two of us." Noah smiled gently. "But I'd rather be afraid with you than safe without you." Winter descended on Promise Creek with a fierce determination, blanketing the town in snow and ice. Grace's health seemed to stabilize in the cold, dry air, though she still tired easily and the cough persisted. True to his word, Noah began calling on her regularly. He brought her books from his late mother's collection, wildflowers he found somehow blooming despite the snow, and once a tiny carved wooden horse that he had made himself during the long evening hours at the ranch. "It's not very good," he apologized as he placed it in her palm. "My father was the woodcarver in the family." Grace traced the simple but charming figure with her fingertip. "It's perfect," she said, and meant it. As Christmas approached, Grace found herself happier than she had been in years, despite the constant shadow of her illness. Noah had become a steady presence in her life, bringing warmth and laughter into days she had expected to be somber and lonely. One afternoon, as they sat by the fire in Martha's parlor, Grace felt a familiar tightness in her chest. She tried to suppress the cough, but it burst forth with alarming force. She fumbled for her handkerchief, horrified to see bright spots of blood when she pulled it away from her mouth. Noah was at her side instantly, his arm around her shoulders. "I'll fetch the doctor," he said, but Grace clutched his sleeve. "No," she gasped between coughs. "This has happened before. It will pass." He looked unconvinced but stayed with her, his hand rubbing gentle circles on her back until the spasm subsided. "I'm sorry," she said weakly when she could speak again. "This is why. This is what I was afraid of." Noah's face was grave, but his eyes held no pity, only concern. "Don't apologize. Not to me. Not ever." That night, after Noah had gone and Martha had helped her to bed, Grace lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The episode had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. It was a stark reminder of the reality she had been trying to forget in her growing happiness with Noah. The next day, she wrote him a letter, explaining that she couldn't see him anymore, that it was better to end things now before they grew even more attached. She sealed it with a tear and asked Martha to deliver it. Martha took the letter but didn't leave immediately. "Are you certain this is what you want?" "It's what needs to be done," Grace replied, her voice hollow. Martha sat beside her on the bed. "I delivered a hat to Widow Jenkins yesterday. She told me something interesting. She said her husband's aunt had the same condition as you, lungs weakened by childhood fever, bleeding spells, the works. The woman moved out west and lived to be 87 years old. That's one case, Aunt Martha. The exception, not the rule." "Perhaps, but faith isn't about rules, is it? It's about possibilities." Martha placed the letter on Grace's nightstand. "Sleep on it, dear. If you still want to send this in the morning, I'll take it myself." Grace didn't sleep. She tossed and turned, torn between protecting Noah from inevitable grief and allowing herself to experience love in whatever time she had left. By morning, she had made her decision. She tore the letter into tiny pieces and threw them into the fire. She would not hide from life or love any longer. When Noah called that afternoon, his face was tight with worry. "Martha said you were unwell yesterday." "I'm better today," Grace said, though her voice was still weak. "Noah, there's something I need to say." He sat beside her, taking her hand. "I'm listening." "My body is failing me," she said simply, the words coming out in a rush. "I don't know how much time I have, but I do know that I care for you more than I ever expected to care for anyone, and if you're willing to accept the uncertainty, then I am too." Noah's eyes shone with emotion. "Then faith will succeed us," he said softly. "Whatever happens, Grace, we'll face it together, with faith in each other, in God's plan, and in the strength of what we're building." He leaned forward and, for the first time, kissed her, a gentle, brief touch of his lips to hers that seemed to Grace like a promise and a prayer combined. Christmas came, bringing with it a festive spirit that infected even Grace's cautious heart. The town gathered for a celebration at the church, where a tall pine tree had been decorated with candles, strings of cranberries, and small handmade ornaments. Noah stood beside Grace throughout the service, his presence steady and reassuring. When the congregation sang carols, Grace joined in despite her weak lungs, the joy of the season giving her strength she didn't know she possessed. Afterward, as they walked back to the millinery shop through the snow, Noah stopped suddenly and turned to face her. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small, carefully wrapped package. Grace opened it with trembling fingers to reveal a silver locket, simple but beautiful. Inside was a tiny painting not of Noah, as she had expected, but of the mountains surrounding Promise Creek, rendered with surprising skill. It's beautiful, she breathed. Open the other side, Noah urged. She did, finding a small piece of paper carefully folded inside. Written in a neat hand were the words, "Faith over fear, love over time." "Grace Thatcher," Noah said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "I know we haven't known each other long by some standards. I know there are challenges ahead. But I also know that I love you, and I want to face whatever comes at your side, as your husband, if you'll have me." Grace felt tears filling her eyes, not tears of sorrow or fear, but of a happiness so intense it seemed to physically warm her against the winter cold. "Yes," she whispered, "yes, Noah Jackson, I will marry you." They were married on New Year's Day, 1879, in Promise Creek's small church. The town turned out in force to witness the union, many bringing gifts and well wishes for the couple. Grace wore a dress of ivory silk that Martha had worked on secretly for weeks, and Noah looked handsome in a new black suit. As they exchanged vows, Grace felt stronger than she had in months. There was color in her cheeks that wasn't just from excitement or the cold, and her voice was clear and steady as she promised to love Noah, for as long as God grants us. They moved into Noah's ranch house, a sturdy structure built by his father years before. It was larger than Grace had expected, with enough bedrooms for a family a possibility she scarcely dared to consider. Winter gave way to spring, and with the changing season came a subtle change in Grace's health. The bleeding episodes became less frequent, the cough less severe. Dr. Miller, Promise Creek's elderly physician, examined her and declared with cautious optimism that the dry mountain air was indeed having a beneficial effect. "I've seen it before," he told her and Noah. "Not a cure, mind you, but sometimes these conditions stabilize. You're young, and with proper care, there's no reason you couldn't have many good years ahead." Noah squeezed her hand, his eyes bright with hope. "Did you hear that, Mrs. Jackson? Many good years." Grace couldn't speak, her heart too full for words. As spring progressed into summer, Grace threw herself into life on the ranch with cautious enthusiasm. She planted a vegetable garden, learned to bake bread in the wood-burning stove, and even, on her strongest days, rode out with Noah to check on the cattle that grazed in the high meadows. One evening in late July, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple, Grace turned to Noah with a look of wonder on her face. "I think I might be with child," she said softly. Noah's expression shifted from surprise to concern to joy in the space of a heartbeat. "Are you certain? Is it safe for you?" "No to both questions," Grace admitted. "But Dr. Miller has agreed to monitor me closely. He says my improvement over these past months is encouraging." Noah gathered her into his arms, his cheek resting against her hair. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together. With faith." The pregnancy was difficult. Grace's strength, improved though it was tested to its limits. She spent many days confined to bed, Noah hovering anxiously nearby, reading to her, bringing her small treats from town, and simply sitting beside her, his hand in hers. Winter came again, harsh and unforgiving. Grace grew larger with child, her breathing more labored, her cough returning with concerning frequency. Dr. Miller visited weekly, his brow furrowed with worry as he listened to her lungs and felt her pulse. "The baby is healthy," he assured them, "but the birth will be a trial, Mrs. Jackson. I won't deceive you about that." Noah hired a woman from town to help with household duties and to stay with Grace when his ranch work took him away from the house. Ellen Patterson was a widow with grown children, kind but no nonsense, and Grace came to rely on her steady presence. February brought a blizzard that raged for 3 days, piling snow high against the windows and making the roads impassable. It was during this storm, with the wind howling like a banshee outside, that Grace's labor began. Noah sent Ellen's teenage son, who had been helping with the stock, to fetch Dr. Miller on their strongest horse. The boy returned hours later, half frozen and alone. "Doc's delivering twins over at the Thompson place," he reported breathlessly. "Says he'll come as soon as he can, but it might be hours yet." Noah's face paled, but Ellen stepped forward, rolling up her sleeves. "I've delivered more babies than I can count," she said firmly. "We'll manage until the doctor arrives." Grace's labor progressed with agonizing slowness. The effort of pushing exhausted her already weakened body, and several times she began coughing so severely that Noah feared she would choke. "I can't," she gasped after hours of fruitless effort. "Noah, I can't do this. My body is failing me again." Tears streamed down her face, mingling with the sweat of exertion. Noah knelt beside the bed, taking her hand in both of his. "Then faith will succeed us," he said, his voice trembling but determined. "You are the strongest person I have ever known, Grace Jackson. You can do this. Our child can do this, and I'm right here with you." Something in his words seemed to give her renewed strength. With Ellen's guidance and Noah's unwavering support, Grace gathered her remaining energy for one final push. The cry of a newborn filled the room, clear and strong above the howling of the storm outside. "A girl," Ellen announced, quickly cleaning and wrapping the tiny infant. "A beautiful, healthy girl." Grace collapsed back against the pillows, her face ashen, but her eyes seeking the child. Noah placed their daughter in her arms, and Grace gazed down at the tiny face with a look of wonder. "Faith," she whispered. "Her name is Faith." Dr. Miller arrived an hour later, looking exhausted from his previous delivery but alert as he examined both mother and child. "The child is perfect," he declared. "As for you, Mrs. Jackson, you need rest and care, but I believe you've come through the worst of it." Recovery was slow. The birth had depleted Grace's already limited reserves, and for weeks she was confined to bed, able to hold and nurse little Faith, but too weak for much else. Noah was a constant presence, dividing his time between caring for his wife and daughter and maintaining the ranch with hired help. Spring arrived, bringing with it a gradual renewal of Grace's strength. By May, she was able to sit on the porch with Faith in her arms, watching as Noah worked in the fields visible from the house. By June, she could walk short distances, Faith growing heavier in her arms with each passing week. On the anniversary of their first meeting at the stagecoach stop, Noah surprised Grace with a special dinner after Faith had been put to bed. "1 year," he said, raising a glass of cider and toast, "the best year of my life." "Despite everything?" Grace asked, gesturing vaguely toward the bedroom where her medicines still sat on the dresser. "Because of everything," Noah corrected. "Every challenge we've faced has shown me the depth of your courage, your resilience." He reached across the table to take her hand. "Do you remember what the doctor in Boston told you? That you had a year at most?" Grace nodded, the memory no longer bringing the fear it once had. "Well, here you are. A year later, a mother, a wife, and from where I'm sitting, more beautiful and alive than ever." Grace felt tears welling in her eyes. "I was so certain I was coming here to die," she said softly. "Instead, I found a life beyond anything I could have imagined." Noah smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling in the way she had come to love. Faith succeeded where certainty failed. "Faith," Grace agreed, "and love." 5 years passed, each season bringing new joys and challenges. Grace's health remained delicate but stable. She had good days and bad, times when the cough returned with concerning force, but the dire predictions of the Boston doctors never came to pass. Faith grew into a spirited, healthy child with her father's wheat-colored hair and her mother's gentle disposition. When she was 4, she was joined by a brother, Samuel, whose birth was easier than Faith's, had been a fact that Dr. Miller attributed to Grace's improved overall health. On a warm summer evening in 1884, as the children played in the yard and the sun set behind the mountains, Noah found Grace standing at the garden fence, gazing out at the landscape that had become her home. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Jackson," he said, coming to stand beside her. Grace leaned against him, feeling the solid strength of his shoulder against hers. "I was thinking about that day we met, how terrified I was of everything, of dying, of living, of caring for someone only to leave them behind." Noah slipped his arm around her waist. "And now? Now I understand what you meant about faith succeeding us." She turned to face him, the setting sun illuminating her face, still pale, still delicate, but alive with joy and purpose. "Even if I had only had that 1 year the doctors predicted, it would have been worth it for the love we've shared. But to have all this," she gestured toward their children, their home, the life they had built together. "It feels like a miracle." "The miracle was you getting on that stagecoach, coming to a place you'd never been, facing your fears," Noah said softly. "Everything else followed from that courage." Grace smiled, watching as Faith chased her little brother across the yard, their laughter floating on the evening air. "No, the miracle was you saying those words that changed everything. Then faith will succeed us. You gave me hope when I had none left." Noah pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "And you gave me a reason to believe in that hope." As darkness fell, they called the children inside. Grace's cough might never fully disappear. Her lungs would never be as strong as they once had been, but she had found a strength beyond physical endurance, the strength of faith, of love, of a life built choice by choice and day by day in the shadow of mountains that had witnessed countless human struggles and triumphs. Her body had failed her in many ways, but faith had indeed succeeded where medicine and certainty had faltered. Not faith alone, she knew, but faith entwined with love, the kind of love that sees beyond limitations to possibilities, beyond fears to hopes, beyond endings to new beginnings. And as she tucked her children into bed that night, her husband's hand warm in hers, Grace knew with unshakable certainty that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together with faith succeeding them always.